This is Vermont Edition. I'm Mikaela Lefrak. When I got up this morning, I was greeted by a perfect spring day. The sun is shining, the wind is blowing gently, and the lilacs right now smell like heaven. It is a perfect day for today's annual spring gardening show. Our guest is Charlie Nardozzi, gardening consultant extraordinaire, speaker, TV, radio host. You can hear him on Sunday mornings right here on Vermont Public for all things gardening. Charlie, it is always so great to see you. Welcome.
Well, thank you. It's always great to be here and with a live audience.
Yeah, we are not alone.
We are not
There's
alone.
lots of people looking at us. It's very strange.
It is, I know.
We are doing something a little bit different this year for our spring gardening show. We are in front of a live audience at Vermont Public's Colchester Studios. You want to let them know you're here? Our audience members have submitted some gardening questions for you, Charlie, ahead of today's show, which I'll ask throughout the hour. But for those of you who are listening at home or in your car or from your garden, you can submit questions too. You can call in at 800-639-2211 or send an email to vermontedition@vermontpublic.org. Charlie, since I started this show with the weather, let's talk a little bit about the weather. We had a particularly cold and snowy winter this year compared to winters in the past couple of years. How is that going to affect our gardening?
Well, it gave us a lot of moisture in the soil, and then we got a real cold and rainy spring, which kind of added to that. So as you can see, everywhere around New England, there's a lot of lush growth, a lot of green growth, a lot of beautiful flowers coming out. It's been actually a really nice spring, kind of slowly building up to the summer. And hopefully it'll continue to slowly build and not just go right into a crash course of 90-degree temperatures.
Yeah.
Because of all that moisture in the soil, it's been a blessing and a curse. So it's been a blessing that we have that moisture. If you've been transplanting trees, shrubs, perennials, they're going to be much more likely to survive. The curse is, of course, if you're trying to put things into the soil and you can't get your boots out of the mud walking into your garden, it's a little frustrating. But that's why raised beds are really good for annual gardens and vegetable gardens, so that you can have that elevation so that soil will dry out faster and warm up quicker so you can actually start gardening when you want to.
Okay, so you brought up the moisture that's in the soil,
Yes.
and that reminds me of one of the questions that we got from Aaron in Colchester, who's in our studio audience today. Aaron wants to know, how do I keep my soil from molding? This has happened to me too.
Molding,
Actually, or just
kind of
getting like
black and
fungusy.
Well, a lot of that could be due to the organic matter. So if you put any kind of mulch on it, that often will happen if it's really rainy conditions. You'll get mold starting to form in there. There's one mold that's really kind of fun. It's called artillery mold, and it actually shoots spores out when it's actually fruiting.
Never mind.
Not interested in that one. Okay. Anyway, so if you can remove that mulch and work the soil a little bit more, just gently, I'm big on no-dig gardening, so don't dig the soil, but kind of scratch the surface so it dries out a little bit. That's really the whole idea behind it, because mold is a fungus that likes it nice and moist and wet.
Okay. Another question about the soil and when to plant things at this particular time of year. We got an email from a listener named Lorna, who is concerned, as many of us are, about climate change. And Lorna's wondering if climate change and the warming temperatures that many of us have noticed in this region in the winters and springs have changed when you should plant things in your garden to protect them from frost. Like, have you noticed we can start planting things earlier in the season now?
Yeah, you can start planting a little earlier, but it doesn't discount the idea that you're going to get a late frost.
Yeah.
And we saw that happen 3-4 years ago, I guess it was, when all the orchardists and the berry and fruit growers had a late frost and wiped out their crops. So I wouldn't go hog wild and think you're living in North Carolina yet. So I would just really watch the weather, watch what's happening in that season. Where I have noticed it more significantly is in the fall. Our falls tend to extend longer. If you can get through a couple, maybe early frosts in September, October, you often can go well into November with growing different kinds of plants. Okay. So I think I would put the emphasis on more kind of growing in that direction than trying to get started a little bit earlier.
Okay. Charlie, I am always so struck when you come on Vermont Edition with the depth of your knowledge about our region, the climate, and plants. And I'm realizing as you talk that I've never actually asked you about yourself at all. which is
I'm a mystery to you.
you really
am I?
are. You're just this font of never-ending knowledge. But
Yeah.
when did you start getting into gardening?
Well,
Take us back
how
to
much
young
time
Charlie.
do you have there, Vertigo? So I grew up in Connecticut.
Okay.
And I grew up as part of an Italian-American family. My grandparents came from Italy, and they had a farm in Connecticut. And when each one of their kids, the 6 kids, got married, they gave them a piece of land on the farm to build their home. So I grew up with the Italian-American enclave, which I thought everyone grew up like that. That's just how the world was. Until I went to school, and it's like, what? Your relatives live where? So anyway, I had the farm all around me, and my mother always would have a garden in the backyard. And so that's kind of how I started it, just having agriculture and horticulture all around me.
What was she growing?
She was growing tomatoes, big
course.
surprise, right? And basil, and Italian beans, and zucchini, mostly. And she actually would try sweet corn, too. I have a cute picture that I show in a lot of my presentations of me holding a big basket of vegetables when I was maybe 4 years old and had hair in the garden.
That's what's under the hat.
That's what's under the hat. Yeah, nothing.
So did you, it's good to know that you started from a point, even though it was a long time ago, when you were a little kid, where you didn't know about gardening and you had to learn.
Right.
Because it can be hard, I think, as an adult to, maybe you're like me, you finally have the space to garden a little bit, you have a little more free time, and it can feel hard to kind of catch up with the knowledge that other
Right.
people seem to have.
Yeah, it can be very overwhelming when you're
Yeah.
first starting out. But the nice thing about gardening is that you always are learning. And I still kill plants. It
No,
happens
I don't
yes.
believe it.
Got a cemetery out there. So you're still learning because every year is different. The weather is different. Insect pest problems are different. Deer show up in your yard and haven't been there in years. All kinds of different things can happen. So that's the thing that I like about gardening is that it really kind of keeps you fresh. You're always learning new things. And so even though you might think you're an expert gardener, there's still stuff that you can learn. So even as a novice gardener, we're in the same boat. We're still learning.
Before the show, I showed Charlie some very sad pictures of my
your
plants.
rhododendrons, yeah.
My rhododendrons. Yeah, poor little buddies.
Growing them under eaves.
Okay. Don't garden shame me on air. I'm working on it.
Okay.
All right, if you have a question for Charlie Nardozzi or want to tell us about maybe a recent gardening win, you can call in at 800-639-2211. You can also send us an email to Vermont Edition at vermontpublic.org. Charlie, we got a lot of questions about berries, blueberries, raspberries, strawberries. One person in our audience, Rhonda from Duxbury, wants to know, what should I be doing to my blueberry bush to get a higher yield this year?
Well, make sure it's in full sun. That would be probably the number one thing you want to do. That way the bush will grow strong and produce a lot of flowers and fruits. Make sure the pH of the soil is good. It should be below 5 on the pH meter.
How do you figure that out?
Well, you can get a soil test done. UVM does soil tests for a very reasonable fee, and one of the things you'll find out is your pH. pH scale goes from 1 to 14. 7 is the middle or neutral.
I remember this.
Anything
way
lower,
back.
way back in high
Yeah,
school
yeah.
biology. Yeah. Anything lower than 7 would be considered acidic. And so plants like blueberries and rhododendrons and azaleas like an acidic soil. So that's going to make a big difference as far as nutrient uptake and all that kind of stuff. So do that. Make sure they're not weedy. Keep the weeds away from them. Blueberries are shallow-rooted plants, so they're not going to compete well with a lot of grasses, quackgrass, things like that. So try to keep it clean. I put wood chips on our blueberries every year, and that's a really nice mulch because it breaks down. It allows a lot of air to go through there, so it doesn't really block the water and moisture going in, but it also blocks a lot of the weed growth that'll be there, and it eventually adds a little fertility. So if you could do all those things, then you get to a place like we are with our blueberries where I just mulch them and I don't fertilize them anymore. They're actually good-sized plants and they're growing well, and we get more blueberries than we can eat.
Really?
Yes.
It's a great problem to have.
It is.
Do you use different kinds of mulch in different parts of your garden?
Yes, a good question. So I love wood chips, arborist wood chips. And these are the ones when you see people doing the chipping trees around phone lines and places like that, they're always looking for a place to dump those chips. They don't want to just keep bringing them back to the yard. So if you see someone working in your neighborhood, it's often great just to go up and ask them if they have a place where they're going to dump their chips, and if not, can I have them? What's nice about these chips is that they're different sizes and they're pretty kind of chunky, but they're irregular. So if you're looking for that manicured, beautiful golf course kind of mulching that you might see all the same color and all that, wood chips are not going to work that way because they're going to be very non-uniform and kind of graying in color. But as far as the plants go, it's really nice because they let air and water in really well. So I usually use the wood chips around trees, shrubs, and perennial flowers.
Okay.
Some of the tougher perennial flowers, the daylilies, peonies, things like that. For, excuse me, annual gardens, annual flowers, or annual vegetables, I like having something that'll break down faster. So grass clippings is really nice. Chopped up leaves or chopped up hay and straw. So just run your mower over some leaves that you might have from last year or some hay or straw and bag it all up if you have a bagger and use that around them because that'll break down a little bit faster, provide a little bit of nutrients, but it still is enough of a cover that it's going to prevent weed growth from happening.
Okay. Is there ever a time when it's okay to have weed growth, when you can just let them hang out?
Well, that's another topic.
Well, let's do it.
So let's get into
Let's get into
that. So the more recent research about soil science is fascinating. And if I was ever going to do it all over again, I'd get a degree in soil science. Because not only are they realizing that in the soil is a living entity, there are billions of microbes there that are creating networks and creating pathways for water and nutrients to be flowing between the plants. And in fact, they find out now that the plants have a level of intelligence. There's a consciousness to these plants. So a tree in a forest will sense that a tree next to it is not doing so well, and it'll send extra water and nutrients to them.
Really?
Pretty cool, huh?
Oh, that's beautiful.
It's one of those examples of, the individual tree is not as important as the whole forest. There's a life lesson for you, Mikaela. Tell it to your kids. So when you're talking about weeds, often in a garden, we like to kind of clean up a garden, especially an annual garden in the spring, till it and make it nice and clean, almost like a sandbox kind of thing. And that's the worst thing you can do for your soil. The best thing would be to not ever till it or turn it because that microbial network is there. And also to always have plants growing on it, even weeds. Because what the other thing researchers are finding is that through the process of photosynthesis, the plant is making food for itself, but it's also sharing that food, up to 20 to 40% of it, with the soil. It's sending food into the soil and feeding the microbes because it's a symbiotic relationship. So it's not just a one-way street where the plants are taking nutrients out of the soil. It goes both ways. So that's my pitch for keeping weeds.
Yeah.
Some of them are very delicious. I eat dandelion greens every year. Wintercress, dandelion, amaranth greens, lamb's quarters, all those are great. But then I also realize that weeds can be a problem. So if you have annual weeds like the amaranth and the purslane and those kinds of weeds, a simple thing to do in your garden is get one of those flat-headed hoes, make sure it's nice and sharp. And Elliot Coleman made these very famous. And you can stand upright by holding your hands opposite. So instead of holding them down like this, thumbs pointing down, you do it with your thumbs pointing up. And then you just kind of scuffle along. You can be singing your tune. Da, 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 da. As you just can walk around and you just cut the top surface of the soil, killing those weeds. So that's what you can do for annual weeds. You do that a number of times into May and June, and you won't have a problem.
And the singing's important.
And the singing is very important,
element.
right?
Okay.
Yeah, they want to hear those songs before they meet their end.
Before they die.
And then you have the perennial weeds, which is the one most people are concerned about. The quackgrass, the dandelions, the burdock, all those kinds of weeds, bindweed. And those there's no pretty way to talk about this. You got to get on your knees with your cobra hoe and just dig them out. And what's been really nice about all this rain we've had is that those weeds come out a lot easier if the soil is moist.
Yeah.
So one of the best things to do in the spring is to get your rain gear on, your slickers and all that other stuff. Go out there in the rain and weed, because you'll be much more successful getting a lot of those things out. Making gardening sound really fun, doesn't it? So you're muddy, you're dirty, and you're exhausted.
Singing.
And you're singing to them, too.
Still sounds fun to me. Let's take a caller here. We have Mary Beth in North Middlesex calling in. Mary Beth, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so here's my question. So I have a lilac bush. I have several. But one of them, it's about 35, 40 years old. It's quite tall now. And for the first year, there's a downy woodpecker that seems to love living in it, but also pecking at the branches, pecking at the wood. And I want him to have a home, but I also don't want him to ruin my lilac bush. So just wondering how vigilant I need to be about scaring him away all the time.
Well, yeah, because we had a similar issue with our willow tree. We had a woodpecker that was enjoying just pecking away at our willow tree. Didn't try to nest there, but was creating all these holes all along the stem, and we could see the willow was starting to fade a little bit, not getting the water and nutrients it needs. So it is kind of important that if you can scare it away, that would be a really good idea, to do it, of course, in a safe and humane way, and to maybe even protect it. If there's a certain area on the lilac that they seem to really like, if you can wrap that with something. We did that with kind of like a mesh material, almost like a flexible window screen. We just kind of wrapped it around there and then used some Velcro straps to kind of hold it in place. And that deterred them for going into that one area. And if it's the same thing happening with your lilac, you can do that with a couple of the main branches.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, great. Mary Beth, good luck. Thank you for calling in. We also have Rua in Charlotte calling in with a question. Rua, you're on the air. Go ahead. Hi, can you hear us?
Hello.
Hi.
Yes. Hi.
What's your question for Charlie?
Thank you. Yeah, so thanks for taking this question. So after 30 some odd years of growing broccoli in my garden last year, apparently I got Swede Mites.
Oh.
So no broccoli crowns. So I'm not wanting to plant broccoli in that same row, but is it safe to plant it somewhere else in the garden?
Yes, so we should form a support group because we have Swede midges too.
What is that?
A Swede midge is a small little aphid-like insect, and it goes after brassicas, so the broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, and it goes into the growth point. And so, as you know, with a broccoli head, what you're eating is actually the flower. So it goes in there before the flower really gets going, and it causes a damage so that you get all these little kind of heads, spindly heads coming up, but no big broccoli heads.
Oh, very
and
rude.
Yeah, and it causes kind of a blast of the Brussels sprouts. So instead of getting a nice little foreign ball, you get something that just kind of explodes. Well, not literally, but yeah, it looks like that. So anyway, it's a tenacious little insect, and it's hard to control. You can certainly spray for it, but I try not to do much of that. The thing that I do with it is rotate, so don't plant that broccoli in the same bed this year or same area, and also cover it starting right after you plant it with this micro mesh material that I've been talking about, that flexible window screen material. What that does is that it covers the plant, lets in light and air and water, and you can see through it too, unlike some of the fabric materials where you can't really see very well what's going on inside. And so you can water through it and you can take care of your plants, but it blocks that Swede midge from getting in. And I've tried that a number of years now. It's been pretty successful. I still get it once in a while here and there, but for the most part, those brassicas have survived.
Charlie, how do you, what's the right way to phrase this weird question? How do you emotionally approach the concept of pests? I mean, this woodpecker question that we just got, I think, is a great example of this, of seeing, the inherent value and beauty of a creature. Like a woodpecker is probably a little easier than, these little...
Swede midge.
Yeah. But
Nothing to do with Sweden, by the way.
Okay.
Swede referring to the kind of plant it attacks.
But I think
In case there's any Swedish people listening.
Yes, please. The concept holds, though. Even if it's not a cute or beautiful bird, it's still a creature, a living thing in its own right. And it can be hard sometimes to figure out, when do I prioritize my garden and my yield and how I want this space to look versus when do I just let nature be nature?
I think it all depends on what you're looking for. If you're trying to be out there and be like a farmer, or you're needing to be self-sustaining with your food and that kind of thing, then you're going to have to make some tough choices as far as what you do with animals and insects kind of coming in. But if it's more of a hobby or a lifestyle, just kind of like being out in nature, like being out growing food, if I get a handful of cherry tomatoes, I'm happy. If I get a bushel full, I'm still happy. Then it's a kind of a different approach. And how we approach it is that we make sure there's a lot of diversity in our landscape. So we have a big garden that used to be all vegetables, and that was it. And then slowly over time, the vegetables, they're still there somewhere. I have to look for them sometimes. But there's flowers, there's annual flowers, perennial flowers, there's herbs, there's bulbs, there's vines, there's shrubs, there's trees, there's all kinds of other things now growing in there. So it's creating a habitat. and it's a habitat for different kinds of insects to be in. It's even a habitat for a bunny to be in every once in a while, and sometimes they get in through our fencing system, and I just put a fence around the beans or the kale or whatever they seem to like, and they kind of hang out a little bit, and then they go off, do something else. So you can kind of cohabitate with these kinds of creatures, but you have to have some barriers, some kind of material around them that's going to protect your garden a little bit, and you have to be realistic about what you're going to get from your garden too.
Well, as we're talking about pests, let's talk about jumping worms.
Oh.
This comes up every time you and I talk, these pesky little buggers.
Yes,
and
they're
we
still
got a
there.
question from someone in our audience, Sonia in Colchester, who says, as jumping worms in my garden are here to stay, what can I do to ensure I have a productive vegetable garden anyway?
Yeah, so that's a tough one. For those who don't know about the Asian jumping worms, or the snake worms, another name for them, they're an imported pest, an exotic pest that's moved into the United States. Just as a little aside, there are no native earthworms in the United States, in North America. They all got wiped out in the last ice age. So any earthworms we have here have been actually exotic, have been brought in. So first was the European settlers bringing in the big earthworms that we've had. And they've been able to adapt to our soils, and the soils have adapted to them, and they seem to be okay. But these Asian earthworms, or Asian jumping worms, are much more aggressive, and they eat a lot more. And they reproduce a lot more too. And one of the hard things about them is that they make little cocoons where the eggs are in the soil. And guess what color the cocoons are?
What?
Brown. Try to find those
Smart.
in a
Hats
handful
off to
of
you,
soil.
jumping worm.
Yeah, exactly. Very smart. A very good survival technique. So anyway, they are around in a lot of gardens. You can tell if you have a jumping worm because literally it will jump. This is another
How
fun
high?
thing. Oh, I've gotten one to jump
No.
about a foot or so, yeah. Yeah, I pulled him out. I poked him a little bit to see what he was doing. He was kind of sluggish. I pulled him out, and he got really agitated. I put him in a plastic pail that I had, and he was just like jumping up and down.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. He didn't like it there. Yeah, well.
Probably didn't like if you called him sluggish. Get it? Okay, sorry. Move on.
There's always one in the audience, okay. So anyway, they wiggle a lot, and they wiggle a lot, and they reproduce, and they're a little bit smaller than a regular earthworm, and they're in the upper level areas of the soil too. One of the things you could do to see if you have jumping worms is to get about 1/3 of a cup of ground mustard seed and put that in some warm water, like a gallon of water, and you mix it up, and then dump it on the bed. And what that does is irritate the jumping worms, and they'll come to the surface, and then you can have a frenzy just picking them all and throwing them into your plastic buckets. You're not interested.
I think you just
Okay.
moved at that point.
As of right now, as far as I know, there's no real solution to them. I know researchers, Joseph Goras at the University of Vermont is doing a lot of research on this, and his graduate students. They're doing all kinds of researches with biochar. They're doing researches with other kind of additives, beneficial nematodes, things like that, seeing if that would somehow thwart them. Because the adults don't survive the winter, but the eggs do, and then they come back. And the big concern is that they get into the forest. And once they're in the forest, they'll eat all the organic matter and make it so that seeds can't grow very well, and you get a very barren forest. You have the mature trees and nothing else underneath. So that's the concern. In a garden, if you can clean out as many as you find, that's great. To be realistic, you're not going to get them all. So I think making sure you have healthy soil, organic soil that has a lot of organic matter in it is going to be really good. So they'll have something to eat, but your plants will still have a lot of good soil to grow in. If you see these coffee ground kind of piles of soil, that's an indication that there's a lot of them there, that they're feeding there.
Go ahead.
One last thing.
Okay.
I know I can go on and on about jumping worms. If you are bringing plants into your yard, this is really important because I know a lot of garden clubs and plant clubs share plants. If you're bringing plants in from someone else's yard and they don't know if they have them or not, the best thing to do is knock all the soil off. Wash all that soil off into a plastic bag and plant that plant as a bare root plant, because you're not going to know if there's the jumping worm eggs in there or not. Another thing you can do if you're bringing in compost or even wood chips, they've been found on wood chips too, is to lay it out flat like on a driveway and cover it with plastic mulch. Or excuse me, not plastic mulch, a plastic sheet as a mulch. The idea is to solarize it, to heat it up to 105 degrees for at least 3 days. That will kill the eggs and will kill the adults. So there are a few things you can do, but generally it's going to be something we talk about every year on this show.
Oh, well, Shannon, best of luck with your garden. Hope it's still productive despite the jumping worms. If you're just joining us, we are speaking with Charlie Nardozzi, our local gardening expert for Vermont Edition's annual Spring Gardening Show. We are in front of a live audience today in our Colchester studio, but you at home can still call in and ask your gardening questions. Our number is 800-639-2211. Charlie, let's pause here for one more short break, but the reason I almost interrupted you was because you had brought up something that looked like coffee grounds, and we have an actual question about coffee grounds. But we'll get to that in just a minute. This is Vermont Edition. Stay with us. Welcome back to Vermont Edition. I'm Mikaela Lefrak. Today is our annual Spring Gardening Show with Charlie Nardozzi, a gardening consultant, writer, and speaker. Today's show is being recorded in front of a live audience at Vermont Public's Colchester studios. Do you guys want to say hi again? You too can call in from home or the car or your garden. 800-639-2211 is our number. Maybe you're wondering what you should be doing now to get ready for a great summer harvest, or maybe there's a flower or a fruit or a veggie that you're considering planting for the first time and you need some advice. Again, 800-639-2211 is our number. Okay, we were about to talk coffee grounds. Okay. Charlie, we got a question from Carol in Rutland who wants to know if there is a use for coffee grounds in the garden. In the winter, Carol mixes them with wood stove ash for use on her icy driveway, but during the growing season, she wants to know if she can use coffee grounds in the garden or if she should just add them to the compost pile.
I think you can just add them to the compost pile because even though coffee grounds do have some nitrogen in them and some acidic qualities to them, after they've been coffee ground and then water's gone through them, they really are just a good additive as far as an organic material. They don't have any these special qualities that people think that, put them on there and your plants are going to grow 10 times faster or anything like that. So I put that in the home remedy kind of group of it's good, but it's not as good as been billed.
Is there anything that you can put on your plants and they'll grow 10 times faster?
Well, things that I would not put on my plants, yes.
Oh. Okay.
Chemical fertilizers, things like that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. We have a caller. Jim in Stockbridge is on the line with us. Jim, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. I'm wondering on behalf of myself and some of my farmer friends, what you recommend to combat against the heavy metals that are being distributed through the skies through geoengineering these days. It's been approved in UK, and I'm wondering how to combat the aluminum, barium, and strontium that are now in our soils.
Jim, thanks for calling in. So some concern about the soil.
Right, and the heavy metals that are in the soil.
Yeah,
I think the first thing, Jim, of course, is to do a soil test. And again, UVM can do that for you to find out what the levels are of those heavy metals that might be in the soil. And once you have an idea of where you are in that range, if it's really excessive, then they'd have to be doing some kind of remediation. And then, excuse me, it comes down to things like biochar is something that they've been doing a lot of experimenting with to make sure that it can take some of the heavy metals out of the soil. I know there are certain plants that you can kind of grow. Mustard, I think, is one of them. That could be another one that will take them out. The only problem with these remediations is that you get the biochar or the plants loaded up with the heavy metals. Then what do you do with them?
Yeah.
Right? So you have to remove them from your property or remove them from the fields and then find some way to dispose of them that would be environmentally safe. So it is a big concern. I know that there's a lot of research that's going into that. And having soil, though, that's heavy in organic materials and organic matter, so you have a lot of these microbes, like I've been talking about, that are in there, can help make sure that the plants will grow well and hopefully not take up as many of these heavy metals.
Well, we have another caller with a question about pH and soil health. Lisa in South Hero. Lisa, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi there. What's your question for Charlie?
So I did a soil test after 4 years of unsuccessful gardening, and found out that my phosphorus level and my magnesium is very high. 451 for magnesium and 128 for phosphorus. So what can I do to get a healthy garden soil? And
Yeah.
how long will it take?
Yeah, that's a common problem of phosphorus levels, especially in soils in Vermont. You really don't have to add phosphorus fertilizer in situations, certainly situations like this, but in general, because most of the soils in Vermont have a good bank of phosphorus already. And then
Why is that? Can I ask?
I think it's more about the soil composition
Okay.
than anything else.
Okay.
Yeah. The excess phosphorus, of course, runs off and gets into the waterways and all the issues that are attributed to that. So what I think, going back again, not to kind of sound like a broken record here, but a lot of it's due to having a strong organic component to that soil, so that the organic matter is in there will help at least mitigate some of those excesses that are in your soil. If your plants are growing okay, and it seems like after 4 years, you said you had kind of mixed results, you might want to try adding things that have maybe a little more nitrogen to them, for example, depending on what the soil test has told you. But certainly you want to avoid anything that has magnesium in it or phosphorus in it, including some of the limes, like the dolomitic lime has magnesium in it. So if you have a low pH and they say add lime, don't use that kind, get a calcitic lime that has more calcium in it.
Charlie, what are your resources that you trust to learn about, soil health? You know so much about it. You said you kind of still wish that you could go back to school and learn even more. But as you continue to educate yourself about this, what resources do you turn to?
There's lots of podcasts out there. Certainly, there's the state extension websites that are all around the country, following different people who are experts in the field. You know, the one woman who's done a lot of research on this soil science stuff is Dr. Elaine Ingham. She used to be at Oregon State. She now has a group called the Soil Food Web. And she and her cohorts are working with farmers who are like in the Midwest with thousands of acres and turning them more into no-dig or no-till farmers using organic materials and compost and things like that. So doing webinars with people like that and just kind of getting part into their podcasts and their newsletters kind of keeps me somewhat abreast of what's going on. Yeah. I'm not on top of everything for sure.
One thing that I've been learning about since I moved to Vermont a few years back is how different parts of the state are, the different zones, and how you really have to tailor your garden strategy to the unique part of the region that you're living in.
Right.
How different are we talking here, from zone to zone? What are the different changes?
Zones, it's not too different anymore. I mean, it's still colder, obviously, in the Northeast Kingdom and up in the mountains than it would be down in the Champlain Valley or the lower Connecticut River Valley. But, the zones have been shifting, the hardiness zones we're talking about. So now a lot of parts of the state are Zone 5, which was unheard of when I first moved here. Everything was Zone 3 and 4 and sometimes 2, which is like the Arctic kind of thing. So that has shifted a little bit. But as far as soils go, yes, there's a variety. In the Champlain Valley, it's a lot of nice clay. Love that Addison County clay, don't you? So there's a lot of that we have to work with. You go up into the hills. I remember I went up to Lewis Hill's place. I don't know if any of you remember Lewis Hill, but he used to write books and live up in Greensboro. And I was amazed he had sandy soil. He was up in the mountains, but he had just a certain little area where his farm was, and he had sandy soil. So there are a variety of things. There's river bottom soils along the Connecticut River and some of the bigger rivers, Winooski River, those kinds of places too.
Well, let's take another call here. We have Francine in Sheffield calling in. Francine, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Hi. I have 2 lilac bushes. I've been here about 25 years, and they're about 25 feet high. And one of them only has maybe 4 little buds coming off of it, and the other one has got full leaf on it. I don't know if it's completely dead, what to do with it.
Do you have any new growth coming off from the bottom, from the root system?
No, just on a very few tips. There's just a couple green buds, but the rest, nothing.
Yeah, so most of it is dead, it sounds like. Yeah, so I think
I don't know if I should leave it.
No, you don't. You're wondering if you want to leave it there?
Yeah, it looks so sad next to the other one. I mean,
yeah.
And 25 feet high.
25 feet high. It's a pretty old bush.
Yeah.
I would say it's time for a little drastic pruning. So I would cut it way back. And as you're cutting the branches, if you have one that's a live branch, you see, of course, with still green bark in it, then don't cut that down to the ground. Cut it down to maybe a foot or 2 tall. But everything else, just cut all the way down to the ground. and just leave it there. It's not going to look pretty for now. But what I'm trying to do is to try to shock it into actually sending up some suckers out of the root system. And if you get some suckers, then you can start all over again, and you can have another 25 years of beautiful lilacs. If you don't get any suckers coming up, then it's probably time to move on. And there's lots of great other lilac varieties. You can dig that one out and then put a different one in, or some other shrub.
Well, thank you for calling in, and good luck with the lilacs. Speaking of things that are beautiful, that enrich our lives visually, Kelsey in Colchester wants to know, what are some new perennial varieties that you are excited about these days?
Perennial varieties. Wow. Well, I'm growing Stokesia.
What is that?
You remember Stokesia? We went to school with her.
There's always one in the audience.
That's right. There's two in this case. So Stokesia is a perennial. It has a beautiful kind of blue flower, cushiony kind of flower, and it blooms towards the fall, which I really like. And there's some new varieties. I'll be honest, I can't remember the name of the variety off the top of my head, but it's a new one from Proven Winners. That's how I know. I read a blog for them. So that's kind of a cool new variety that's out there. There's lots of these different Heliopsis out there, the kind of the small little sunflower kind of like plants have multiple sunflowers to them. So they stay bushy instead of growing tall, and they have like, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 sunflowers on them. So things like that are kind of fascinating to me. I try not to get into the things that have been over-hybridized, like some of the echinacea that are out there. There's lots of different colors of echinacea now, but there's a couple now that look like little toy poodles. They got little fluffy heads, you know, it looks like someone shaved them, you know, they're really cute. One's called hot papaya, another one's called milkshake. That's what it's called. It's a milkshake. So they're kind of interesting, but they're not great for pollinators. That's the thing. So I'm trying to look for varieties that are interesting and nice to have in the landscape, but still are good for wildlife, beneficial insects, pollinators, that kind of thing. There's a lot of new ones called nativars, native varieties that are kind of one step away from the original species. For example, the butterfly weed is often an orange-colored flower. There's a new one called Hello Yellow, I think it is. It's a yellow flower.
Who gets to name these? Like
a bunch of people sitting around after hours, maybe having a few beers, and we'll call it Hello Yellow. Yeah.
I don't know if they're having beers.
So that one is still good for pollinators, but it's kind of a step removed. So look for those when you're shopping for plants.
All right, now is the portion of the hour where I get to ask you my personal questions.
I thought we already did that.
No, whatever. I have a lot.
You've got more questions. Okay.
You brought up sunflowers, and this reminds me, I was gifted a little packet of mammoth sunflower seeds, and I really want to grow them. I love sunflowers, but I know they're going to be big. Mammoth.
Yes, mammoth. That's why they call them that.
Do you have any suggestions of where to grow such a unique mammoth plant?
Right.
Yes. Yeah. What do they need to thrive?
Well, they need a lot of sun, obviously, and a lot of room to go vertical. And it's best to grow them in a group. So you have little kids, right?
One, yes.
One, okay. So this is a fun thing to do with him or her. Her, thank you. And her name is?
Mara.
Okay. Now we got all that out of the way. Here's a fun thing to do with Mara. So you can make a sunflower house. So you have an area in your yard, and you just plant the sunflowers in a semicircle, leaving one area that will be the door. And you let the mammoth sunflowers grow up, and as they get mammoth, they have big seed heads that kind of flop towards the center.
Yeah.
So then you can kind of tie the center sunflowers all together, and then you could put a little table in there with little chairs, a little tea set. You can have tea with Mara.
Wow.
Yeah, have lemonade. She can make a lemonade stand, make some money. All kinds of fun things can happen.
Tell me you've done this. That you have one of these at your house.
I don't have one of these at my house. Sorry. Because you want to come with Mara.
I mean,
this is
great.
What we do. No, so that's a fun way to grow sunflowers. You know, grow them together, grow them in groups, grow them in the back of the landscape. We don't buy sunflower seed any longer, because what happens is we leave our sunflowers to drop their own seed, and the birds eat some, the chipmunks and squirrels eat some, but invariably there's some left. And this time of year, they're popping up all over the place. And then we do a little constructive editing. We move the ones to where we want them to be, and everybody's happy. Nice.
I love that. Okay, sunflower house.
Yeah, a sunflower
I'll give it a
house.
try.
Okay.
Let's take another caller. We have George in Cambridge on the line. George, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mikaela. Hey, Charlie.
Hi.
We are in Cambridge on the Lamoille River, and like a lot of riverbanks in Vermont, we suffer from Japanese knotweed.
Ooh.
Now, it's probably holding a lot of the riverbank back from erosion, which is a good thing, but the rhizome network just keeps on consuming everything. We try to cut it back, but it's into the shrubs, it's into our compost. Anything that you know of we could do to stop that network from spreading laterally. We certainly can't eradicate all of it. Any thoughts?
Before you answer, Charlie, I just want folks to know, if you couldn't hear it over the airwaves, when you said Japanese knotweed, George, you elicited this kind of murmur of despair from our
the
live audience.
Yes.
People are
It's like,
very concerned. Go ahead.
Yeah,
what does he
I
do?
think the best option, George, is to move. Go to the hills, go up high, get away from the river. Japanese knotweed hopefully won't follow you. No, seriously though. Yeah, it's a big problem. Along any stream, any river, any lakeside, anything where there's water, Japanese knotweed loves to live there. And as you're finding out, it has a very extensive root system that can go all over the place. And what I've read about that, which is even more fascinating, is some people have cut it way down, put tarps on it, left the tarps on it for 20 years.
No.
Pulled the tarp off, and guess what happened? The roots started growing again. That's why I told them to move. So it's really something that's really hard to control. And obviously, being next to waterways, you don't want to use herbicides. So it kind of limits what you can do. The best option I could give you is to kind of draw a line in the sand. It's like, you live over there, Japanese knotweed. Over here, we live, and you're not coming in. So try to decide where you can kind of cut it back, push it back far enough to get rid of some of those roots. Dig down a trench and put down a deep edging, probably a metal edging or a really strong plastic edging so they can't get through. They're going to get through anyway, but not as extensively. And then be diligent about pulling them out when you see them in the spring. Believe it or not, Japanese knotweed little shoots are edible. So you could create a new culinary delight and call it something else. I don't know what you'd call it.
Kale.
But don't call it knotweed. And start eating it. But short of that, there's really not any silver bullets for it.
Wow. Okay. Would you rather have to deal with jumping worms or knotweed?
This is my nightmare. It keeps me awake
Your
at night.
seventh rung of
I've
hell.
got a garden that has nothing but jumping worms and knotweed in it. What do I do? And quackgrass, and horsetail, and agapodium, goutweed. Anyway,
I won't
I'm
make
not
you
going to
choose.
answer that question.
Okay. All right, we do need to take one more short break. If you have a question for our gardening expert, Charlie Nardozzi, you can call in at 800-639-2211. This is Vermont Edition. Stay with us. Welcome back to Vermont Edition. I'm Mikaela Lefrak. Today is our annual spring gardening show with Charlie Nardozzi. He's a consultant, a writer, and a speaker. And today's show is being recorded in front of a live audience at Vermont Public's Colchester studio. Let's do one more clap. Just let them know you're there. Yeah, they're all awake. There's still time to call in if you have a question. 800-639-2211 is our number. We have Abby in East Montpelier on the line for you, Charlie. Okay. Abby, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Hi. Thank you. I am thrilled that I could finally have a Viburnum carlisi when they came out with the baby spice. Mm-hmm. And yep. I put it in, I guess it would be 2 summers ago, and each year, as soon as the leaves come out and the buds, flower buds come out, the leaves start to curl, and when I uncurl them, I find little granular eggs, and this year I finally saw a tiny caterpillar. What can I do?
Ah, yes, those little caterpillars, they're like leaf rollers. They roll up the leaf and they form their little home in there, and then they lay their eggs and they turn into caterpillars that they really don't do damage as far as eating all the leaves, but all the leaves are curled, so it looks not so great. It's hard to spray for them because they're in the leaf, so you'd have to use some kind of systemic insecticide, so I'd rather not do that. I have the same problem with our hydrangea arborescens. It does that too. And what I started doing is I started, believe it or not, picking leaves or opening up the leaves. That's another thing you can do. So if you have someone with time on their hands.
Why are you looking at me?
I don't know. You have a daughter.
I'm
that's
very
why I think
busy.
Send your daughter out there and do something. So unfurl all the leaves and just squish that little caterpillar in there. So if you can carefully do that, you could do it without really damaging the leaves. The other option, of course, is if there's not too many of them, you just snip them off. But the key is to remove that caterpillar if you snip them off and don't leave it around there. I did that for a couple years on this arborescens hydrangea, and I don't seem to have them as much anymore. So I think that would probably be the safest solution.
Well, Abby, best of luck. Thank you for calling in. We have a question from our audience for you, Charlie. Gwenna in Duxbury is asking about the best time to plant asparagus and where do I get asparagus root balls? Now, I have heard that asparagus is one of the more finicky plants to plant. Is that true? Or it takes patience? It takes a couple of years?
Yeah, that's a better way to look at it. It takes patience. Okay. So the best time to plant asparagus was probably a month or so ago. Ooh. So sorry.
Sorry.
But you could still do it now. Okay. It might be harder to find the crowns. What you buy is actual crown that looks like a spider. So it's got a center area where the shoots come out and has all these different tentacles or roots that go around it. So when you're planting it, you want to make sure it's a full sun location, well-drained soil. Don't do what I did when I first put it in.
What'd you do?
I put it in a place that was kind of wet soil and not really well-drained, and it just rotted. So make sure the soil is really well-drained. You dig a trench about a foot deep, and you make these little mounds, like little volcanoes at the bottom of the trench, about a foot apart. And
this does sound finicky.
Well, this is just kind of a quirky thing.
Okay, you're building a trench, you've made the mounds.
You got the mounds, right?
Okay.
Well, the idea of the mounds is that you're going to put the crown on top of them and drape the roots over the mound. Oh, how nice is that? Put a little chocolate sauce on it, and you got a sundae. Anyway, then you backfill it to just the level of where the crown is. And then as they start growing shoots, you continue to backfill with native soil. You don't have to put in any fresh soil. And then, of course, the key is to keep it well weeded, keep it well watered the first year with well-drained soil again, and not to pick it for about 3 years. About third year, you can pick it.
Okay. I mean, that's ludicrous.
But you're young. I mean, really, come on. What are you going to do for 3 years goes like that. It'll be done, and before you know it, you'll be eating roasted asparagus.
No asparagus
and you'll be thanking me that I encouraged you to do it.
I'll just come to your house. All right, we have a call from Richard in Coventry. Richard, you're on the air. Go ahead.
And thank you for taking my call. Charlie, about 5 years ago, I hired a guy to plant some white birch trees. I planted 9. And I noticed last year, one started dying, and we had some high winds this past winter, and it broke off. And now they're not seeming to, the leaves aren't coming out like they should. Now, I'm afraid all my trees are dying. I can't figure out why.
So if 8 of them are doing okay, and it's just that one white birch, it could be something that attacked the roots, or maybe the roots weren't really very strong when they planted that one. Plants are variable, just like people. So you treat them all the same way, and people grow up differently, or people have health issues and not have health issues, all those kind of things. Same thing is happening with plants too. So it's not unusual if you plant that many of the white birches that one of them might struggle. So what I would probably suggest to do is to make sure it stays, well, right now it's probably really moist, but stays well watered this summer. Maybe put some compost around it. If the soil is heavy, you might even want to get an iron fork and just kind of dig little holes in with push it into the ground and rock it back and forth, just to open up to aerate it a little bit, get a little more oxygen into the soil. And hopefully that will help it survive. Sometimes if they're big trees, that transplant shock is pretty severe on them. They cut a lot of the roots off when they make those root balls. And so it takes a few years for those trees to actually recover and start growing.
Well, best of luck, Richard. I hope the birch tree recovers. We have Joe in Keene, New Hampshire calling in. Joe, go ahead.
Hello?
Hi there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm calling from Hinsdale, New Hampshire. I've been trying to replicate the success that I had 8 years ago with my very first Mother of Thousands plant that was given to me. And when it was given to me, it was very small. But inside of 3 years, it was very vine-like, and I actually had to stake it to where, eventually at the end of 3 years, it was over 10 feet. And, I tied it up against the stake, and I had to train it up and over a bay window I had in my living room. And, but I haven't had anywhere near this success over the years as, that very first mother of thousands plant that was, it grew into a very sturdy vine.
Okay.
What am I doing wrong?
I think if as long as it's been growing healthy, it shouldn't be really an issue with it. Have you repotted it recently?
After 3 years, I moved from that location, and I had to leave it there. I mean, there was just so, I had it in a very, very large vase, and there was no way I could move it, so I just left it there. But since then, I've tried growing more, mother of thousands, which, as you know, the seeds grow on the outsides of the leaves. So, that's no problem getting seeds. It's just that
Joe, I'm just going to jump in because I had not heard of this plant. I just Googled it. It looks very cool. It's also known as alligator plant, Mexican hat plant, devil's backbone.
Devil's backbone.
I know.
Ooh,
that's cool.
sounds,
I know.
dangerous.
But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So what you're trying to do then is you're trying to propagate a new one, or you can't take the old one because it's too big. Is that what's happening?
I had to leave the old one behind,
Right.
But I've been growing other plants, mother of a thousand plants, and instead of growing up into a vine, they tend to grow out wide and squat.
Oh, I
So
see.
he wants it to be a
You
vine.
want more viney.
Vine-like.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Joe.
Well, the original one sounds like it was doing what you wanted. So what conditions was it growing under? Did it get a lot of light? Was it more in a shady kind of area?
It did get a lot of light.
Okay, and
what I've learned over the years is you can't make the mistake of overwatering.
Yes, right.
It is a succulent.
Right. And so sometimes what'll happen, especially if there's seed growing, you're going to get variations from the mother plant. And sometimes the tendency to vine might be something that gets lost in that process of doing it. So I would suggest if you have access to more of that seed, maybe go back and get some more from the mother plant, to grow a bunch of them and see if you can find some that are still vining, because you might have that variation just because of growing from seed versus an asexual propagation.
Charlie, and thank you so much, Joe, for calling in. Good luck with the Mother of Thousands.
Mother of Thousands.
Great name.
Wow.
I want to make sure we get to a couple more questions from
Okay.
our studio audience, and we got a great one from Kitty in Essex Junction. It starts with a disclaimer. It says, Charlie, do not take this personally. How can you control creeping Charlie in the lawn?
Well, first of all, you don't invite creeping Charlie over for lunch, because when they come, they don't want to leave, and then they'll be all over the place. So creeping Charlie, for those who don't know, is a ground ivy, and it's flowering now. It's got a pretty little purple flower. It's low growing. It spreads through lawns. It spreads through perennial gardens. It's very opportunistic. So if you have a lawn that's a little thin, maybe has some bare patches and things, that's where it's going to come in first. So the first thing to do is to get rid of it. And the way to do that without using chemicals would be just to, after a rain, again, pull it out. It doesn't root very deeply all along the stem, and you can often just kind of pull it for a while. It's kind of very satisfying, actually, and get a lot of it out. But the key is, once you've pulled out an area that you cleaned up, then come into your lawn and top dress it with some compost, probably topsoil, maybe a 3 to 4 inch thick layer of topsoil, and then put some grass seed in. And you want to put grass seed in that's similar to what you're already growing. So if it's a full sun lawn, you might want to have grass seed that has more Kentucky bluegrass. If it's more shady, you want more of the tall or the chewing or short fescues. But get a good grass seed in there and get a nice thick lawn, because once you have a nice thick lawn, then creeping Charlie doesn't want to show up at your house anymore. He goes creeping down the street.
Well, at least you're named after a plant that is has a beautiful flower.
It has a nice flower. It's got a bad reputation, though.
Same.
Oh.
Charlie, every time I see you, you are about to head off on some amazing adventure.
Yes.
What travels do you have ahead?
I'm going to Sardinia, Italy, next week.
Next week?
There's a gasp in the crowd.
We're all coming.
Yes, I lead garden tours, and I've been doing that for now 15 years. And so every year we go to 1 or 2 different places. This year, we're going to Sardinia, Italy. And so when we go, we see public gardens. I've hooked up with a landscape architect there who's going to show us some of his projects and some of his private gardens, as well as some, of course, if you go to Italy, you've got to do cooking classes, you got to go to wineries. You just have to do it. It's so hard.
Sorry.
It really is tough.
Yeah.
You know, it's just hard to do all those things.
Yeah.
And then there's beaches and mountains too. But anyway, and in the fall we're going to Scotland. So
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so in September, and we'll be part of the Highland Games. Watching men in kilts throw things around.
Very different from gardening.
Yeah, very different in Italy.
Charlie, what keeps you gardening in Vermont after traveling to so many wonderful places? What do you love most about being here, this climate, this soil, this air?
Yeah, it's always nice to come back home, and that's really what this place has been for me for over 40 years now. And it's a beautiful place. I think we sometimes forget that, especially in the Champlain Valley where I am, with the lake there and the mountains and the Adirondacks. And every morning's a little different. I was driving down to New Hampshire through Vermont earlier this spring when all the red maples had their red flowers out. And the light was hitting it a certain way with a little moisture in there. It was just kind of glistening. It's magical.
It is.
So it's a beautiful place, and it's a great community of people here, and I love living here.
Well, Charlie, thank you so much for reminding us of both the magic and the science behind gardening. You know both very well. We are lucky to have you. Charlie Nardozzi is on All Things Gardening on Sunday mornings on Vermont Public. If you want more, you can also subscribe to Vermont Public's email newsletter, Sprouted, with gardening tips and tricks. You can subscribe at vermontpublic.org/sprouted. Charlie, thank you so much.
It's always fun to be here. Thanks.
It's always a pleasure. Today's show was directed by Aaliyah Papes and engineered by Phil Edfers and Peter Angish. Our managing producer is John Ahrens, and our producers are Andrea Lorian and Daniela Fierro. Our call screener today was Rick Barrett, and our theme music was composed by Myra Flynn. Special thanks to our live studio audience here in Colchester. One more round of applause. And thank you to everyone who helped us put on this event, including Amy Zielinski, Brian Stevenson, Kyle Ambusk, Kaylee Mumford, Riley Cartwright, and James Stewart. I'm Mikaela Lefrak. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch up again soon.